Philanthropy Report of 2019, where they have tried to dovetail philanthropy and the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. But in the social sector, the government is the largest spender, the largest contributor. But the private philanthropy needs a little more nuanced approach. The foreign funding has slowed down in recent years because um, for the simple reason that the government has cracked down on organizations that have violated the Foreign Contributions Regulation Act. Nowadays, another source of philanthropy is which has been mandated now, 2% of the net profits of a particular size of company, and so this is called the Corporate Social Responsibility Initiative, and this will add a lot of money, hopefully, into the sector. It is the individual philanthropists that have increased over 5 years, and it is individual philanthropists that contribute about 60% of the total funding, which is estimated at 430 million rupees annually. Now, the government said spending is large, as I said, but we are still very low in the Human Development Index. We are only 131 out of, I think, 189 countries, which is very low. Now, the number of NGOs in this country is very strong, is very large, and there are 3,100,000 NGOs in the last count, which means that their efforts are all very fragmented. And because the number of NGOs is 200 times the number of 250 times the number of government hospitals and twice the number of government schools. And yet, if the impact is so low, it means that they are very fragmented. As far as CSR projects are concerned, also, in 2018, the utilization was 85%, which is still, we are going in the right direction. It needs to go up. That's the last figure that I could get. But it is a welcome increase from what it was, from 74% in 2015. As I said, it is the high net worth individuals who have the maximum contribution to make. But again, here, if you take out the Azim Premji Foundation, then over the years, the individuals, the philanthropy by the individuals has also decreased. Now, this is problematic because the number of high net worth households has increased. In 2017, the number of high net worth houses were 3,304,000, and in 2022 they are 3,520,000, which means they have increased, and potentially the multiplier effect should have been there, but it is not there. Now, before we come to higher education, we must remember that in pre-independence India, higher education had a huge influx of philanthropy. In fact, some of our most prominent institutions were established because of philanthropy, like Aligarh Muslim University, Jamia Millia, the first colleges of Delhi University, and Banaras Hindu University, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, the Tata Institute of Social Science, the Indian Institute of Science, the various Vidyapeeths inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. So why was it that people were contributing to it? One was they were motivated or inspired by Gandhi, who put forward the trusteeship idea, that people who have a large amount of money, they shouldn't treat it as their ownership of the money, but rather as trustees of that wealth, which is to be used for various purposes. And the second reason was that India already had a very long tradition of what they call charity. And of course, you can make a distinction between charity and philanthropy, but most people use it interchangeably. But charity is known as daan, and if I were to make a distinction, I would say it is for immediate purposes. Somebody is hungry, so you give money. You need to plant trees on the road, so you give money. So this is what charity was all about. Making of wealth, giving it to religious places, giving for food, etc. And then the third very interesting thing that led to philanthropy was the British colonial masters. Now, they didn't have this concept of daan that I talked about. So they understood philanthropy in the Western sense. And so the elites of the country, they wanted to gain favor with the government. I mean, elites and elite business always wants to have favor with the government. So they turned to philanthropy to set up hospitals and teaching institutions of a larger nature. Social causes got added to it, like education of girls, widow remarriage, then uh, the indigenous and relevant education. Then you had the Dalit or the so-called lower caste upliftment. And so why did they give charity? But and to complete the story, so but they also wanted to maintain their influence over their community. So they did both. They divided the amount they were going to spend, some of it in the old form and some of it was in the new definition of philanthropy. Why the impulse to charity was there? Well, it was supposed to be self improvement, which would lead to salvation. And the second was to maintain community leadership and, in the bargain, also do good to the community. So, some of these important names were the Bajaj, Birlas, of course, the Tatas, the Lalbhai family, the Sarabhai family, the Thakurdas family, and this has continued post 1990, that is post liberalization. You have people like Sunil Bharti, Shiv Nadar, the Nilekanis, Azim Premji, and then many self made people among the NRIs. And the Tatas have always worked through their trusts and they have been very, very organized. The Birlas were less organized, but they set up great educational institutions like BITS Pilani. And they also contributed generously to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. Thakurdas was another person who actually had a very business-like approach. He brought the same skills to philanthropy as to business, as did Lal Bhai. Now, the Tatas, again, following the old tradition, did both. They gave money for fire temples, making of fire temples. They gave money for the Parsi community, but also had a more modern approach. Similarly, G.D. Birla had the same kind of approach. Now, what was the more secular approach, to use for lack of any better thing? What motivated them was how they imagined India would shape up as we approached independence. So they also gave a lot of money during the independence movement. They supported Khadi. They also set up the Sabarmati ashram where Gandhi lived. And they also took active part and supported, I mean, after all, Gandhi lived in the Birla house all his life. So they supported a lot of independence movements. But part of the imagining of India, they understood that there was a lack of education. And so they set up educational institutions, schools, especially village schools, and higher education, which I have already talked about. The Birlas also were concerned about the advent and dominance of English, so they supported Hindi literature. And they set up an award for for writing in Hindi. And Gandhi, again, similarly wanted people to get the reading habit, so he set up Sasta Sahitya Mandal, for which I have also done a translation, and they have published a book, my book on that. The whole idea was that the people should get affordable books. Now, since community upliftment was the motive, because India, as it approached independence, could not have masses of people who were illiterate, undernourished, and all the other ills that were there. So they also involved the community. And as I said, this passion for independence and passion for a developed India led to their charity at this time. Part of the imagining was also to transform people's nature. They didn't want people to just get used to freebies and doles. So they wanted self-reliance, and therefore, and also wanted to inculcate finer qualities like hard work. So all these people, Tatas, Birlas, Thakurdas, they insisted that the villagers also make a contribution. Now, if they didn't have money, they would say, all right, you can contribute your labor, you can contribute the cartage, bringing of goods to the site. And so Thakurdas set up a lot of Thakurdas cheap schools, and he repaired a lot of existing buildings. He supported a lot of religious organizations and temples. Madan Mohan Malviya, another big name, supported the Hindu Mahasabha, which was also supported by Birla. And what were the causes that Birla had, apart from alleviation of rural poverty? He added blindness to it, because he realized as he worked in the community, in the villages, that there was, which holds good even today. India has the largest number of blind people, and the tragedy is that most of it is preventable blindness. It is because of untreated cataracts, because people don't have the facilities, and also because of farm injuries, for which they get no help, and other infections because of lack of education on hygiene. So initial impulse was to support your own community, then region, village, but gradually, as things moved, de-idealization took place, and a more systematic evaluation of impact of what they were doing started to emerge. For example, Tatas at first supported only Parsis because they would send them for higher education. And then again, girls' education, vernacularization of girls' education, but only in Bombay. Um, they supported, as I said, various political parties, Congress, RSS, Jayaprakash Narayan. The payoff was that some of these leaders would also endorse them, and which would improve their credentials in business. For example, Jayaprakash Narayan, a socialist leader of the independence time, in 1967 paid his tribute to the Tata's philanthropic work and the efforts to establish modern industry. As we know, the ideal township that he established, Jamshedpur, with Tata Steels. Also, the purpose of Tata's was to inculcate a scientific temper. Now, with the coming of liberalization, one would think that the nationalistic impulse would now die down, because India was already independent and into its 30 odd years of independence, but it became more potent. Why did it become more potent? Because they realized the inequitable development that had taken place, and they realized the divide between rich and poor, the urban and rural, and therefore made efforts to achieve equity, poverty alleviation, societal upliftment, and the goals became refined. It was not just upliftment, but also social justice, also spread of widespread banking, community centers, conservation techniques, management of commons, community radios and other media organization, rehabilitation of the Dalits. For example, they set up a Servants of Untouchable Society, of which G.D. Birla was the chair, and he was supported by Thakur Das, Lal Bhai, Ambalal, Sarabhai, Lala Shri Ram, among others. The same impulse that India must have a highly educated workforce, as I said, led them to establish higher education. Then it widened, Tata support widened to medical research, and he, especially Dorabji Tata, he set up Tata Memorial uh, Cancer Hospital. Madan Mohan Malviya set up Banaras Hindu University, the aim of which was to get modern education, but rooted in Indian heritage and traditions. The land was donated by the King of Kashi. He went to other princely states. Birla was one of the largest donors, and Birla also supported 400 students. And at the insistence of Gandhi, Birla gave Aligarh Muslim University. But interestingly, he kept it a secret so that his community would not be against him. Tata Trusts also, right up to 2006, 2007, kept continual support to the Parsi community and sent the Parsi young men and women for technical and engineering education. So parallelly, you had a larger community and causes, and also your own community was not to be neglected. Now, one would say, is this actually secular? But then they did not see it as a contradiction, because support to your own community or caste or religion and the larger, they could not see that there would any contradiction between the two philanthropic impulses. Even today, I have lived in USA and Canada for a long time. When the NRIs want to support anything, they usually send money to their place of origin, from where they come from, or they will support their own community. Um, Now, very interestingly, with Tata's, what happened was that a gradual shift took place. Instead of trying to uplift a lot of people, they then started to concentrate on merit and excellence. In fact, as far back as 1899, Jamshedji Tata said it made more sense to uplift and support the best and most gifted rather than the weakest. This is strategic thinking. It was inspired by Carnegie and his vision of the exceptional man. Because if you keep trying to uplift everybody, then it's a very, very slow process. Whereas if you create some outstanding individuals who give leadership in society, it might be easier to make it percolate down. So it is this vision that led to the establishment of one of our most well-known and prestigious institutions, the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. Now, this vision was further strengthened by his son Ratanji Tata, not the present Tata, but his predecessors. The Dorabji, he said only the best and most qualified should be appointed. And also, when he established scholarships, he said it has to be given to the meritorious so that they can go ahead further in life. They're already at a particular takeoff point and they can go ahead. Then he gave money for research funding. And even here, he said the best in the field must come in here. And the same impulse made, and which would be surprising to so many people, Dorabji Tata gave a generous grant of 25,000 pounds to the engineering school of the University of Cambridge for the reconstruction and expansion of their school. Except he just said that he hoped that their school would also encourage Indians to come and study there. And so the important thing for the Tatas was that the right person should be appointed. And therefore, for example, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was built around Homi Bhabha, a brilliant scientist. Similarly, the Tata Institute of Social Science was built around Clifford Mansart. Now, he was an American sociologist who was in India and who had earlier headed the Nagpara neighborhood house. So, it was not as if since it was the best, they could draw upon talent from wherever possible. And so the scholarships given were not given as grants, but as loans, so that when people became able to, they would return it. Similar impulse led Kasturbai Bhai Lal Bhai and Vikram Sarabhai to set up a management institute today, which we know as the very prestigious institute of IIM Ahmedabad. And SNDT University is the,
Just
I mean,
want to remind that the participant can ask questions through chat window.
Yeah, please just keep asking questions. I will now move on to what has happened today. Why has philanthropy really dried up in higher education? Well, because of the huge mismatch of demand and supply. So a lot of private institutions have come up, and that also some of them are very some of them are unscrupulous. It has also led to a distortion in education, because mainly market-oriented courses are developed by the private sector, and many substandard arts, science, commerce colleges which get affiliated to state universities. This leads to further distortion, because then the state universities are very poorly funded, since the public sector doesn't have enough money for enough resources. And so it is the affiliating institutions which give the affiliated institutions which give the affiliation fee, which funds it. India spends very little on higher education, 0.7 to 0.8%. And so the talk of subsidy on higher education is just so much talk. It's not subsidy. We need to spend more on higher education, but the way we spend it is important, because the salaries are sometimes as much as 95%. And so no money is left for academic infrastructure or for physical infrastructure. The Tatas understood that the best multiplier effect is to partner with the government. But now that is impossible, because of very rigid governance that has taken place in higher education, which has led to mediocrity. Mandatory courses, territorial jurisdiction of educational institutions, the mode of budgetary allocations, even the title of the courses is given to you. All aspects are to be governed by existing rules, which leaves no place for any creativity or any initiative. Therefore, the private sector does not want to fund this mediocrity, and they don't have any say also in the way their money is spent. But what have they done? The private institutions have all established societies and trusts to set up private institutions. Now, these are not built out of grants or endowments. These are built on cost recovery basis. Now, can we term this philanthropy? It's hard, because really speaking, philanthropy is not that you set up an educational institution as a business proposition and then you recover the money over a period of time. Now, such trusts and societies have grown manifold, which has led to a paradoxical situation that the number of trusts and societies have grown, the number of not-for-profits have grown. They all claim tax exemption, but really they are not really doing charity. So also the passion that was there in pre-independence and during independence has evaporated. Since there's so much mediocrity, that don't want to fund anything. Distorted policies, because, for example, I don't know now, but UGC would deduct the money that you got as a donation from your grant. Then the government set up a Bharat Shiksha Kosh, which was an educational fund for people to put money into it so that it could go to institutions. But when alumni funds institutions, they do it out of an emotional attachment. They don't do it as an anonymous gift to whichever institution. Also, the funders don't have any say in any governance or even in their vision. For example, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences has huge numbers of people outside, but nothing. They don't, So two things have happened. Private institutions, maybe good, some not so good, have mushroomed, and these are not philanthropic institutions. And we have a large number of students going abroad. And so we need to have complete overhaul of governance structure. We need to balance our social justice requirements with merit. We need to have a culture of quality rather than a culture of mediocrity. We need to reduce politicization of our campuses if we want funding to come. We need to build up an alumni culture. We need to prioritize research, for which we have to tie up with industry, and we cannot treat all business as a bad word. And so, and the boundaries between research institutions and industry have to be porous, and there has to be greater accountability of the way the funds are being used, because even non-profits do not know their impact factor. And so also, even those who do try to estimate it think that they have not impacted more than 50% of what they set out to do. Thank you so much. I've rushed through, but that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an informative talk, giving historical and contemporary perspective on philanthropic funding. So I have a question, ma'am. So
Yes.
how Indian universities should do this soul searching and tap the resources from where they can get this funding in the present time?
They can't do it like that. Because if you're going to spend, if you're going to have, if I'm going to give you a large chunk of money, I need to say that I want to establish this chair and I want you to do this. But you can't do it. The institution can't do it. It has to go through a plethora of approvals. So also then you have to go through the same process of interviews. So, you have to change your governance. You have to allow them to have more creativity. You have to hold them accountable both ways. But don't over govern them. Don't over administer them, because then there is no initiative. IITs have attracted alumni funding, but now they don't, because they have no say.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one gray area wherein the funders do not have any say in the governance, and probably
And there's
the
no structure also for which they can say, okay, you can come in for this period of time, you can see through your chair or whatever, nothing.
absolutely, absolutely. So, so it's a time also, ma'am, and thank you so much. We are so delighted to have you as a keynote speaker, and I'm
Thank you.
sure the attendees would have benefited immensely from your informative talk, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.